She once called one of the most controversial figures in modern history her supreme friend. She was slowly being welcomed back into the royal family, and then everything collapsed. But here is the part nobody is talking about. According to sources, Sarah Ferguson does not blame the person you would expect. She blames someone entirely different. And when you hear who it is and why, it is going to reframe everything you thought you knew about the quiet power struggles happening behind those palace walls. So stay with me, because this story goes much deeper than the headlines. Let me set the scene for you. Sarah Ferguson, also known as Fergie, was once one of the most beloved figures in the British royal family. She married Prince Andrew back in 1986, and for a brief, shining moment, she was adored. Warm, funny, refreshingly unfiltered in a world full of stiff upper lips. The public loved her, the tabloids loved covering her, and for a while, she was genuinely one of the most recognizable royal faces on the planet. But royal life is not exactly known for being forgiving, and Fergie's fall from grace started long before her recent headlines. The question has always been, how far down could she actually go? Well, we now have an answer to that, and it is further than most people imagined. Now, here's something I want you to hold on to as we go through this story, because I think it is the most psychologically interesting piece of this entire puzzle. When powerful people fall, they almost never accept full responsibility. That is just human nature. We all look for the person who let us down, who threw us under the bus, who did not have our back when it mattered. And according to insiders, Sarah Ferguson is doing exactly that right now, and the name she keeps coming back to is not who anyone expected. But before we get there, let me catch you up on exactly what happened, because the backstory here is genuinely extraordinary. So here's where things started unraveling in the most spectacular fashion. The U.S. Department of Justice released the Epstein files. Now, for context, these files were related to the legal proceedings surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, the disgraced financier who was convicted of serious offenses. The release of those documents sent shockwaves through the media because of the number of high-profile names that appeared in them, and among those names, Sarah Ferguson. Now, it is critically important to say this clearly and carefully. Appearing in those files is not by itself any suggestion of wrongdoing. That has been stated repeatedly by legal experts and the outlets covering the story. But the nature of the content that emerged involving Sarah, that is where things became genuinely difficult to recover from. Because what resurfaced were emails. Emails in which Sarah, according to reports, referred to Epstein as her supreme friend, and emails in which she allegedly asked him for financial assistance. Now, let that sit for a second. The phrase supreme friend, when directed at someone of Epstein's documented history, is the kind of language that no public relations team on earth can spin into something harmless. It is extraordinary. And I say that not to pile on, but because it is genuinely one of the most damaging pieces of correspondence to emerge from the entire Epstein file release involving a royal adjacent figure. The optics were catastrophic, and Sarah Ferguson, who had spent years carefully rebuilding her image and her relationship with the royal family, watched all of that work essentially evaporate overnight. And here's the part that makes this even striking. According to reporting, Sarah had been slowly, quietly being welcomed back into the royal fold. After years in the wilderness, years of financial troubles, years of being sidelined, years of feeling like an outsider looking in at the family she had married into, things had apparently been improving. She had been seen at certain royal events, there were signs that the frostiness was thawing, and then the Epstein files dropped. And just like that, the door closed again, loudly. Now, I'm not going to sit here and claim I know exactly what was said behind palace doors, but I can tell you what sources are saying, and what they are saying is that the damage this time may be irreparable. So now we come to the part of this story that I genuinely could not stop thinking about when I first heard it, because when things go this wrong, when your reputation takes this kind of hit, when you feel like the world has turned against you, there's always a question of who you blame. And according to an insider who spoke to Heat magazine, Sarah Ferguson is not sitting quietly and reflecting. She's angry, she's bitter, and she is reportedly unloading on someone very specific. The source described her as feeling very bitter and angry, and as someone who feels wronged by everyone in the family. Now, I want to be fair here. These are the claims of an unnamed source, and Sarah's spokesperson was contacted for comment. But the details that follow are specific enough that they paint a vivid picture of what is allegedly happening. Here is the detail that genuinely surprised me. The person reportedly getting the brunt of Sarah's fury, according to this source, is Queen Camilla, not Prince Andrew, not some faceless palace bureaucrat. Camilla. And the reason this is so psychologically loaded is because, according to the source, Sarah and Camilla were actually very close friends for years. I mean genuinely close, not the kind of performative warmth you sometimes see in royal circles, actual, real friendship. And that's exactly why, according to this insider, Sarah reportedly feels so incredibly betrayed. She expected loyalty, she expected solidarity, and in her view, according to these reports, she did not get it. Now, I want to pause here and be honest with you, because I think this requires some nuance. When someone is going through a public collapse of this magnitude, it's very easy to look around and assign blame, and sometimes that blame is justified. And sometimes, I say this gently, it's a way of avoiding looking in the mirror. I'm not saying Sarah is wrong to feel hurt. I'm not saying Camilla did anything wrong. What I am saying is that when an insider says someone is unloading their frustrations over a couple of drinks, we should take that with the appropriate level of skepticism. People say things in private moments that don't always reflect the full, complex truth of a situation. But the fact that these claims are being made at all tells us something important about where Sarah Ferguson's headspace is right now, and it is not a good place. But here's where the story gets even layered, because there's history here, real, documented, messy history between these families that goes back decades. And it's not the history you might expect, because it turns out that the resentment and the complicated dynamics in this web of relationships did not start with Sarah. It started, according to multiple accounts, with Prince Andrew and what he allegedly did in the lead-up to one of the most important moments in King Charles and Queen Camilla's relationship. Let me take you back to 2005. King Charles, then still Prince Charles, and Camilla Parker Bowles were preparing to get married. This was by any measure a monumental moment. Their relationship had been one of the most scrutinized, most complicated, most publicly debated romances in modern British history. For years after Princess Diana's death, the public and the press had been deeply resistant to the idea of Charles and Camilla together. There had been enormous work done, by both of them, by their respective teams, to slowly, carefully shift public opinion. And in 2005, they were finally at the point where the wedding was happening. This was the culmination of years of effort. It meant everything. And then, according to Angela Levin's book, Camilla, From Outcast to Queen Consort, Prince Andrew allegedly tried to have the wedding canceled. Let me say that again. Andrew allegedly tried to get the wedding called off. Now, why? According to the book, Andrew reportedly felt that Camilla was insufficiently aristocratic and that she was not to be trusted. And when he didn't get his way, when the wedding went ahead despite his reported objections, his behavior became what the author described as very, very negative and extremely unpleasant. Angela Levin, who I should note is a well-respected royal biographer who has had significant access to those close to Camilla over the years, reportedly described Andrew as quite poisonous, mean, unhelpful, and extremely nasty about Camilla. Those are not soft words. Those are not diplomatic words. For a royal biographer to use that kind of language about a senior member of the royal family, allegedly based on accounts from people close to Camilla, that is significant, and it tells you something about how deep the animosity went. Now, here's where the story becomes genuinely poignant, at least from Camilla's perspective, because according to reporting on Levin's book, as covered in the Daily Mail, Camilla felt that Andrew did not speak up for her and Charles during a period when that support would have meant an enormous amount. Think about the context. They were fighting for public acceptance. They were dealing with the aftermath of Diana's death. The public mood was not kind. And in that environment, having a senior royal in your corner, someone like Andrew who had standing and influence, would genuinely have mattered. Instead, according to these accounts, what they got was the opposite. One source reportedly said, "I would go so far as to say he was deeply unhelpful when support would have meant a huge amount to her." Now, take all of that history, all of that resentment, all of those old wounds, and layer on top of it the current situation where Sarah Ferguson is reportedly feeling betrayed and bitter and is allegedly directing her anger at Camilla. Do you see how complicated this web actually is? Because if these accounts are accurate, Camilla has been dealing with animosity from the York side of the family for over 20 years, first from Andrew and now allegedly from Sarah. That is an extraordinary amount of interpersonal turbulence for one person to have navigated while simultaneously working to become queen consort. Say what you will about Camilla, and people have said a great deal, but if these accounts are accurate, she has had a remarkably rocky path, not just with the public, but with the family itself. And here's what I find genuinely fascinating.